Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to our first session in the IFC webinar series on employability for higher education. We plan to conduct a session every month or so, and our objective is to share the knowledge and experience we've accumulated through working in the space of education with universities and technical vocational institutes all over the world. Through our employability tool, we've had the privilege of assisting our clients determine where their strengths are and where they could improve when it comes to creating employable graduates. We know all participants here today care deeply about their students and ensuring that curricula and course programs are relevant to what employers need. That's why we're starting our series with this topic. Before we move on to the speakers, I would like to encourage you to use the Q&A box to send in questions, as we will have a Q&A session at the end. Please note that the Q&A box is not public. It will just be the moderators, i.e. Mac and myself, who will be able to see the questions, and we will direct them to the relevant speaker. I will hand over to Mac now, our IFC education specialist, who will be moderating the session today to give us a brief introduction about the topic and an introduction to the speakers. So over to you, Mac.
Thanks, Amy, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first in a webinar series on employability. The topic for today's discussion is course content that counts, preparing graduates for the job market. My name is Mohammed. I'm an industry specialist on education at IFC and delighted to have all of you here. So just before we start, maybe a bit of context, start by talking about what do we know so far about how we prepare graduates for the job market. And I think recently, just as recent as last month, the World Economic Forum in Davos has come out with a white paper on closing the skills gap, key insights and success metrics. And what they're basically saying is that, look, the labor market is shifting very fast. We are constantly being challenged by technology disruption, demographic change, shifting business models, and obviously the future of work and the evolving nature of work. So much so that they estimate that on average between now and 2022, almost 40% of the skills that are demanded for the jobs across different sectors will change. So that obviously means it's going to be a period of disruptive change, and this has some implications. So what kind of implications? So for employers, I think this means that the need to reskill and upskill their employees has never been greater. And they are going to have to try and adapt their systems as well as make more investments in upgrading and training. For governments, I think it means that they also have to respond to the needs of the future and maybe revisit their curriculum standards, their national qualification frameworks, etc., to make sure that the higher education sector is responsive to the future needs of the labor market. And finally, for education providers, I think it's particularly important that they start to now thinking of how they blend their curriculum with the traditional sort of hard skills, combine them with soft skills, with literacy skills, employability skills. And the idea really is how do you boost people's chances to transition quickly into the labor market. So, and obviously the private sector is going to be a leading partner and stakeholder in this process, both from the employer side as well as from the educational provider side. So the essential message of this is that we need to keep working continuously to adapt to the needs of the marketplace just in order to remain relevant. Now, all of this, of course, doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the key players in this enterprise are going to be the education providers and how they interact and work together with employers, which is the subject of today's discussion, will determine how course content will be adapted, how it will become more relevant, and how it will help their students to transition into the labor market. So to talk through all of this, we have assembled today a group of experts from both developed markets as well as from emerging markets, people who are practitioners in higher education, and do this for a living, they will help us guide the discussion and take it forward. So let me begin by introducing our first presenter, Valerie Lopes. She's a professor at Seneca College, which is one of Canada's largest community colleges, and also assistant professor at the University of Toronto. She has vast experience in the area of teaching and learning. She's an award-winning academic. She has worked in Central Asia as well on these issues, and we are very happy to welcome her. And with that, let me turn it over to you, Valerie.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Mac, for that introduction. And we really appreciate that all of you have taken the time to join us today. So I'm going to speak to you from the perspective of program development. So how do you start from the very beginning to make sure that your course content is actually preparing graduates for the job market? So bearing that in mind, my entire presentation will focus on outcomes-based programs and curriculum. A very specific, thoughtful process to make sure that we are able to answer the question, what must the graduates be able to know, think, and do by the time they have completed both the courses and the programs in order to get a job? So we here in Ontario, and actually in Central Asia at the University of Central Asia that I've been working with, we're very guided by ministries of education in the different countries and by regulatory bodies. But within that framework, there's an outcome-based program development process that actually, the pyramid is very much a symbol used to describe that process, because there's a whole lot of work that goes on as a foundation to be able to make sure that our graduates will be able to find jobs. So I'm going to quickly go through that. So we start with a new program idea, and once they have that, or even this can also be used for program review, we do a job analysis. What are the knowledge, skills, and attributes that are the graduates of the program need in order for the jobs that are available? Once that's done, we do a labor market data and competitor analysis. And by a competitor analysis, I mean, we look at the institutions who would be also our students that are applying to our institution are also likely to apply, and to see if those programs are oversubscribed everywhere else, or if there's actually a market to offer this program. Once we have a very solid concept note for the program, we move to the program advisory committees and quality assurance committees to validate the program. And then we get into the work, which is perhaps the most important work of all of this. Once we have the foundation that, yes, this is a program where graduates who graduate will find jobs, and that is in creating these SMART program outcomes linked to job requirements, SMART learning outcomes for programs, which lead to the assessments. And all of the assessments are focused on meeting the outcomes. And that means that if our students graduate from these programs, we have assessed them, we know they have the skills, we've taught, practiced, and assessed the skills that they need for jobs. I've put it as a linear process as well, because you go in one direction for program development and you go in the other direction for program review. You have programs that the graduates are not getting jobs, but you know there's a job market, so you need to work backwards and to find out where is it that they're missing these skills. And all of this depends on what we call constructive alignment of curriculum. And what constructive alignment is focused on is a design process in which what is intended that the student should be able to know, think, and do is the focus of every single aspect of the program or the course. Nothing happens by chance, and they're all linked to the very clear specific outcomes that are articulated both for the programs and the courses. So you see this very schematic diagram here. You will see that everything is connected and it all flows, and that's why all the arrows go mostly into every aspect. So what are these SMART outcomes that I'm talking about? So SMART is for the acronym specific, where we have very clear, measurable outcomes. We use a taxonomy of learning. We make sure that the period of time available for the program or for the course, whatever it is we say that the students are going to be able to know, think, and do at the end of that period is actually achievable. The students have the prior learning. We have the resources available at the university. So everything, we have to make sure not only have we specified these skills that they're going to be able to do, but it's also achievable within the time frame. And they're relevant, right? Not because we've been doing something for a million years or we have specific faculty that have skills that we want to teach in the program. It means that they're going to teach in that program. We have to constantly make sure that what we're doing is relevant and there's a time frame, right? Can we really achieve what we're setting out to do within the time frame available to offer the course? Is this possible in a semester? Is this possible in a 1-year certificate, a 2-year diploma, or a 4-year undergraduate degree? So SMART is a very intentional process, and SMART outcomes actually, you always have to ask yourself 2 questions. Is there a specific focus for the learning, and can it be measured? So for instance, at the end of this presentation, I hope that you are going to be able to explain the steps required to create outcomes-based programs specifically focused on enhancing job prospects for its graduates. So I'm not asking you to explain the outcomes-based programs to go on to a different level of learning, to apply to graduate school, to move on to another program. It's specifically aimed at jobs. And as you can see, I used the word explain that can be measured. I didn't say understand. So many outcomes start with the word understand and demonstrate. But how do you measure understanding? Unless I could open your brain and look into it, I don't know if you've understood something. So that's why the taxonomy of learning is extremely important. So to quickly show you an example of what that means, if we had a program called the Public Health Practitioner Program, we would have maybe 5 or 6 very broad program outcomes. So one of them might be that they analyze the relationship between social determinants of health, health policies and practices in community settings to inform services provided to individuals and community. It's a mouthful. It's a lot of stuff that's involved in meeting this program outcome. And so then we would have there may be 3 courses within the program focused on meeting that outcome, or they might be 5. And these 3 courses might be focused on meeting 3 of the program outcomes. And then, so then you go to the very specific course learning outcomes. For instance, if there was a course in public health policies and practices, it would say, let's discuss. At the end of the course, the students would be able to discuss public health policies that guide the ways vaccines are administered, for instance, or explain the ways in which local public health units are able to meet some kind of criteria. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that everything has to be specific and SMART. So this all happens within the framework of a university or of a technical vocational institute. So nothing, it's all, everything is connected. So if you want course content that counts, you also have to have key performance indicators and measures of success. But everything at the university has to be focused on employability if that is your mission. So what is the mission, vision, and values of the university, right? That also requires that you have teaching and learning centers, program quality units, some kind of quality assurance, program review and development process, because these things don't happen by chance. And perhaps just as important are faculty development programs. So if faculty are going to be teaching outcomes-based in an outcomes-based environment, they have to know how to do that. It's no longer everybody does whatever they feel best. All the courses are focused on meeting the outcomes. All the outcomes are measured very specifically, and then the faculty they determine the best way to get from the outcomes to the assessments. So we have our outcomes-based programs and courses, and also very important are the services, the career services, the applied research, the work-integrated learning, everything that happens outside of the specific classroom. And then you might be thinking, well, where do these essential employability skills come from? They come from both the programs and courses and the career services and applied, all the other extracurricular things that are going to help students meet the job skills. So that in 10 minutes is a very quick introduction to programs, outcomes-based programs and courses. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end. And now I turn it back over to Mac.
Thanks, Valerie. That was really very interesting and obviously content-rich presentation. Thank you for doing it so efficiently. I guess if before we move on to the next speaker, maybe I'll just spend a minute or so recapping what you said. The essential takeaways for me, and this may be different for others. One, I heard you say that it's a system that's strongly guided by regulators. And I think that's an important insight for our audience. The second one was that there's a lot of emphasis on measurement, in terms of the SMART outcomes, the constructive alignment, where it's almost as if you start from the outcomes and work your way backwards, but within a very sort of coherent framework. And then this whole issue of how you get your programs and approaches validated through the system of program advisory committees. I think that's something that's talked about a lot in the literature, as well as in all of the articles that you read on these issues. And the example that you quoted from the public health practitioner program, I think, brought a lot of these issues to light. And the final issue, I guess, would be measurement in terms of the key performance indicators, the KPIs that you alluded to. So Canada, of course, is a highly, I think the education sector is highly regulated, and the colleges, although they have some flexibility and autonomy, there is some guidance provided by provincial governments on direction and policy. And so I wonder if, as we move across to other jurisdictions, if that is the same case, or is it a much more a looser functioning environment? And to help us understand this, we are going south to Mexico, to Tec de Monterrey, one of the premier institutions of higher education in Mexico. We have with us Maria Elena Vasquez. She's Dean of the School of Business, as well as Director of the Center for Retailing at Tec de Monterrey. She has tons of experience in marketing, retailing, strategic planning. She has taught in other countries, the US, other parts of Latin America, like Ecuador, Colombia, as well as in France. And she has a real interest in this topic, and she's going to help us to unravel this a little more. So Maria, welcome, and over to you. Maria,
thank you, Mac. I was having problems with the Mac. I run to share my screen. Thank you for inviting me. Let me share. I was a minute before sharing, and I would like to introduce my presentation, talking a little bit about us. We were born in 1943 as an idea of a man that was very important in Mexico and for our institution, a visionary, Don Eugenio Garza Sada, who was an entrepreneur that believes that Mexico needed a premier university to form the future leaders of our country. And he decided, with a group of business friends, to create an educational institution in Mexico that is a nonprofit institution from the society and for society. 77 years from that date that we were created, we are now a comprehensive university system throughout Mexico, with a presence in 26 cities with about 90,000 students and 7,000 faculty members. And we are a nonprofit, comprehensive university that has very high quality standards of education that has been our DNA throughout these years. And also a characteristic that links us to innovation throughout these 77 years. But in 2012, our board of directors defined a mandate and asked us to continue increasing the strength of the academic quality we deliver to the students that come to our university. And they also ask us to look around to find new ways to train these students in order to be ready to solve the problems in the future. And that's where our journey started in order to develop our new program. So we decided that we needed an educational model that allows students to become leaders that are prepared to face the challenge of the 21st century. And we call that model Tech 21. And that model is based on outcomes, as just Valerie mentioned. And our whole curriculum is developed by using the process that Valerie just described. How do we start the journey? We decided that our new model is going to have 4 main components. A challenge-based learning component that I'm used today to link how important it is to be associated with employers in the market. Flexibility to allow students to decide the way they want to look when they are ready to go to the market. Inspiring faculty that teach them how to be prepared in things, not just knowledge, but to do things. And a memorable experience that give students soft skills that are very important in the market now. But why challenge-based learning? Because it is the set, the framework that allows us to develop transformational leadership competencies and allow us to make our students more competitive in the current world. Also, it motivates and gives a sense of achievement to our students, and it's a very experiential and collaborative and integrative framework that really motivates students. But the model is based on the relationship of 3 main components: the student, our faculty, but at an external link that is the development partner, companies and organizations that are invited to be part of the program in each one of the semesters in the challenge as heroes of the challenge, as I'm going to explain later. We have, by now, we started this new curriculum in 1.5 years ago, and we have by now more than 1,000 development partners that are different type of companies throughout the country, and a specific organization within our university that is responsible for bringing all these development partners so they can be ready to work with us. But we started just where Valerie mentioned, we started with them and asked them what are the skills that they consider are gonna be important for them in 2023. And we find 3 different areas of skills or outcomes, as mentioned by Valerie. The first one, the first set is transversal competencies or soft competencies that are going to be very important in the future. After that, business area competencies and skills, specific program skills that are required in each one of the disciplines that we have at the university. This is an example of the business area where I'm a dean. That's why I select this example. But after we develop those outcomes, we move backwards and put each one of the skills in the elements of the curriculum, and these little elements here, the squares that are at the bottom of each one of the semester, is where we put the challenge associated with specific skills. And I'm going to mention one challenge in particular. The first challenge that students face when they get into business curriculum is a challenge that we call business role for society. And they have to work with a company, a real company, one of the most important retailers in Mexico that has more than 100,000 employees nationwide and more than 500 stores. And they have to answer for them, how could they modify their business model in order to attract millennials and centennials to the stores so that the company can be sustainable. And because we are a nationwide university, this becomes a huge challenge. Students have using principles of project management, fundamentals of management theory, and business model fundamentals solve two challenges. First one, they have to do a situational analysis of the company. And based on that situational analysis, they have to propose business model improvement for the company. But we do this as a challenge where 4,000 students that is the incoming class each year, compete with each other in order to solve this challenge. But before, instead of me giving you all this information, let me show you a video so that you can get a feel of what it looks like to live one of these challenges.
Entre Coppel y el Tecnológico de Monterrey nos permitió brindar a los alumnos una experiencia formativa integral.
A un chavo egresado de este modelo lo visualizo con mucha mayor confianza sobre los retos que va a tener que enfrentar.
La verdad, ver a los alumnos superar el reto de esta manera me hace sentir extremadamente orgullosa de ellos.
El reto me pareció muy complejo, sin embargo una experiencia increíble.
Me ha parecido una experiencia muy interesante, muy valiosa en el sentido de que pues no solo estamos aprendiendo de un libro, sino realmente de las experiencias y de vivencias reales. El estar aquí es una oportunidad increíble y pues nos da una probadita de lo que es el mundo real.
Coppel volvió a apostar por las propuestas de los alumnos de negocios del TEC, principalmente porque el año pasado tuvimos una muy buena experiencia.
Me sorprendió mucho cómo ellos de manera remota pudieron alcanzar a detectar cuáles eran nuestros pain points como empresa, pero también los pain points del cliente final.
Creo que ninguno de nosotros nos planteamos en la mente que íbamos a presentar un proyecto que iba a ser tan grande.
Y a mí me impresiona mucho el trabajo en equipo que han realizado, la dinámica que han hecho, el liderazgo.
Si yo tuviera que describir el reto Coppel en una palabra, le pondría apasionante.
Consistencia.
Inspirador.
Satisfactorio.
Impresionante.
Trabajo.
Sería imponente.
Innovador. Experiencia.
Sin duda sería memorable.
Thank you, Mac.
Thank you very much, Maria Elena. That was fascinating. And I think just the addition of the video really brought everything that you were saying, it brought it to life. So just a quick recap. I think, first of all, I mean, I'm impressed really by the complexity, given that you're running these 750 projects across 26 campuses. That in itself must be a significant undertaking, which means that your institution must be really grounded in in policies and protocols and procedures to be able to coordinate all this activity. But what I took away from you is this, and it's interesting that there was so much synergy between what you said and what Valerie said, even though you used slightly different language and terminology. The essential concept is based around outcomes. It's grounded in experiences. It simulates reality for students just to make their learning experiences much more realistic, and then wrapped in this framework called Tech 21. And the other interesting thing is that it was driven by leadership way back 10 years ago almost, when their vision was to really use academic quality as a key pillar of the institution. And just the fact that you've been able to create these 1,000 partnerships, that in itself, I think, is an exercise in logistics and planning. So kudos to you for that. And thank you. And we will come back to you with questions, I'm sure, from participants. But I thought before we move on to the next speaker, we'll take a pause for about a minute or so and post a poll question so that we know that people are fully engaged and how are they, what is their view on some of what they've heard already. So the question is, does your institution have a formal process for obtaining input and feedback from employers when designing and reviewing courses and programs? So just take a few seconds and answer this if you could, because it's very much aligned with the topic of today's discussion. And while we wait for the responses to come, give it a few seconds before we move on to the next speaker. Okay, so it seems that the bulk of the institutions represented today, they do have a formal process for feedback from students, 75%. And I guess this is a really encouraging sign, and it just adds to the evidence base that we see around the world. More and more higher education institutions are becoming much more responsive to not only the needs of their students, but also the needs of the labor market and of employers. So thank you very much, Macarena, for having posted that. Let's move on. So we heard from Canada, we heard from Mexico. Now we are going to go across the Atlantic, all the way into West Africa to hear from our next guest, Abigail Welbeck. She's Director of Career Services at Ashesi University in Ghana. This is an institution that IFC has known extremely well over the last 10 years or so. We are investors in this, and we help them to basically grow. And Abigail, her role there is to be responsible for career services. She's a occupational psychologist by training, but she has a lot of engagement and involvement with the students, particularly when it comes to their career and professional development. And so we're very glad to have her here. Abigail, with that, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And hello to all our participants. I would like to start quickly with a short background on Ashesi University. So Ashesi University is a private university in Ghana, West Africa, started in 2002, and with a big but very achievable dream of transforming our continent by educating a new generation of ethical and entrepreneurial leaders in Africa. So we have students coming from several countries across the continent. We have a liberal arts core curriculum. 3 quick timelines that I think are worthy of mention. In 2011, Ashesi inaugurated and moved into its beautiful and permanent campus in the eastern region of Ghana, Brekusu. In 2015, we also launched our engineering program. And then in 2018, Ashesi University became one of the 5 private universities out of approximately 80 in the country to receive a presidential charter from the President of Ghana, which is actually a stamp of independence and trust in the quality of the instruction, of our instruction and programming. Presently, I'm very proud to say that Ashesi is recognized as a leader in African higher education, and we have currently 90% of our graduates who start careers within 6 to 18 months of graduation. We have 8% who have started and run their own businesses, and then we have over 600 employer partners in our database. And a lot has actually gone into getting Ashesi to where it is now, and it has been a combined effort of all key stakeholders, you know, our staff, our faculty, our students, our alumni, parents, donors, our foundation, our board, and one of our very key stakeholders whom I'll be highlighting today are employers. So majority of Ashesi's employer engagement actually sits in the Career Services Office. And that has been really set up strategically and specifically to support students' career development and also employability. And we firmly believe that for higher education institutions like us to be able to continue to produce high achieving, highly skilled graduates, there has to be a continuous synergy and communication between us and then our employers. And so this is something that the career services in Ashesi as a whole does very well at. And so we work closely with our recruiters to design our curriculum, to mentor our students, and then also to help us to identify skill gaps that we have to address. So I'll quickly look at 3 ways that Ashesi works very closely with our employers or with industry. The first one I'm going to mention is in line with our learning goals. And it's interesting that Valerie actually mentioned that to have our programs validated by industry and have key essential employability skills, which is what this is also showing. So in 2010, our community, faculty, staff, students, and alumni actually came together to identify 7 key learning outcomes that every Ashesi student, or we believe that every Ashesi graduate should or must achieve after completing their education at Ashesi. And then in 2017, we added a final one. So now we have 8 learning goals, and these are what are showing on the vertical axis. So what we do is when our students are done with internships, the employers fill an internship evaluation form. And so we've linked all the questions on that form to our 8 learning goals. And so employers are able to speak on the students' performances based on those learning goals. And for us as an institution, that is also a university KPI. So like Valerie also mentioned, a key performance indicator for the institution. So our target is to score good or excellent in all 8 learning goals every year. So this diagram is showing us very quickly how our students have performed in the last 3 years. And you can see that we have achieved that KPI. So that's what the first, the 8 learning goals looks like for Ashesi University. So moving on to the next way that we work closely with employers is through what we call our Industry and Innovation Council, which we used to call the Corporate Council. It was essentially just an advisory, an industry advisory council that would meet with our university leadership and strategic development team twice in a year to just gain better clarity on what was happening in industry, how we could use that information to help us to fine-tune the instruction in the classroom and student development as a whole, and also how to use that platform to receive feedback on our students and our graduates, and also to initiate collaborations and partnerships that would enhance the work that we are doing in the institution. And I would like to mention quickly 2 achievements that the Corporate Council has pushed Ashesi towards. And so the first is our French program, which is currently running. It started in 2015. And so this came about because the employers on the council mentioned that graduates performed excellently at the workplace. However, for those of them who had presence in Francophone countries, graduates could not be taken to those countries to work, even though they were very good. And so they highly recommended that we looked at starting a French program, and we actually started that in 2015, and it's running excellently. And then also we have, there were key parts of the industry stakeholders who were instrumental in the setting up of our engineering program in Ashesi that graduated the second cohort this year. And Ashesi, so before Ashesi set up the engineering program, they invited engineering education stakeholders, so from professors to industry players, to help identify the gaps between Ashesi's curriculum, the engineering curriculum that it was coming up with, and also identify key skill gaps, right? And to see how the curriculum can ensure that our engineering graduates were well prepared to start building innovative tools and solutions specific to Africa and the problems that we're facing in Africa. So that's what the engineering program was looking at, and our Industry and Innovation Council was very, very instrumental in that. And so the last piece, or the last area that I'll mention about how we engage with our employers, is to do with what I'll call work-based learning, and offering platforms for experiential learning for our students, right? So right from internships, we ordinarily will have a student have done two internships before they graduate. We'll have job shadowing program for them to be able to shadow an employer in the workplace. Career mentoring, where a student is mentored over a period of a year based on their career interests. Employers also get to get Ashesi students volunteer in the organizations, because Ashesi students are required to do a 40-hour community engagement, without which they cannot graduate. And then they also get students who could come into the organizations, pick a problem in the organization, and try and attempt solving it, and which will serve as their capstone project. And so it's also like finding ways that we can also make sure that we are benefiting, or the employers are benefiting from the association with us. And so finally, I'll just look at outcomes for us in terms of this is validating for us the fact that what we are doing, the relationship that we are having with our employers is working. This is a diagram that is showing a graduate placement within 6 to 18 months. So it's showing that 90%, we're getting a 90% plus placement record, which means that they're getting placement either they're working for someone, they're starting their own businesses, or going to grad school. And so for us, this is a validation, right, that we're doing something right, and that our connection with industry is actually yielding results the way we want it to. So in a nutshell, this is how we engage with employers, and this is how we kind of work through some of the principles and the factors that Valerie mentioned in her presentation. So thank you very much, Mark. I'll hand it over back to you now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Abigail. That was very interesting. And I guess that it's all coming together, starting with Valerie. Then we had Maria Elena sort of building on what Valerie said, and now you've just reinforced some of the initial points that Valerie made. What stood out for me, the first thing, I was impressed with the blue chip names you have on your employer list. I didn't know that so many of them were also present in West Africa. And then the second is the 3 pillars of your engagement with employers. Obviously very interesting, because it seems as if it's part of an overall framework, that you have the continuous feedback, you have the very, I think, interesting idea of the Industry and Innovation Council, and then finally the whole series of internships, experiential learning, the service learning, and particularly innovative thing that I have not seen or come across before is the job shadowing. As students, if you have the opportunity to shadow someone more experienced in an organization, I think that experience is worth its weight in gold. As well, the responsiveness that I think Ashesi showed in terms of meeting the needs of employers in Francophone West Africa, which obviously has very different language requirements. And the fact that you were able to respond to that means just that this opens up much more, different opportunities for your students who might traditionally have only considered, opportunities in Anglophone Africa, but now suddenly they have this other set of opportunities to look at, because their institution was able to help them develop the sufficient sort of language proficiency and skills so they can take advantage of that. Thank you, and we will come back to you, I'm sure, with questions from the audience. Why don't we take another short pause and have another poll question, if we could, Macarena? So really simple question from all of the participants who are present today. Are your programs and courses outcomes based or competency based? And this, I think, will also sort of validate some of what other speakers, all our speakers have said this morning. Okay, it seems, all right, it's almost a toss-up, maybe slightly skewed in favor of competency-based and a lesser percentage in terms of outcomes-based. But I think it sort of provides evidence to the fact that more and more higher education institutions around the world are framing their program design and their curriculum development around what is known in the academic world in terms of the approaches and the pedagogy. So I think that's interesting, and we hope to come back to this later. So thank you very much to all the speakers. Now we want to open it up for questions. I don't know, Amy, if there are questions, but I do have one question, and that's directly for Abigail. And the question is, it's interesting to learn how you use the employer feedback to support student learning. How have you used this feedback to personalize a bit the support services that you provide to your students? So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Thank you for that question, Mark. So what we do when we receive the feedback to start with is we share it with the community. I mentioned how it's a combined effort. It takes the whole village to do that. And so we share with faculty as well. And so faculty picks it up from their angle to see what is it that they can do, what changes, not necessarily major changes in the curriculum, or what changes can they make within what they're teaching in the classroom to make sure that students are able to gain those competencies or skill gaps that we've identified from the feedback. And then we also speak to, so career services is part of a bigger umbrella of students support services in Ashesi called OSCAR. So for example, we'll have the Office of Diversity and International Programs, we'll have student engagement, etc. So everybody tries to see how they can integrate that feedback or build it into the work that they're doing. So for example, we have what we call teachable moments. So where faculty can pick up a competency and make it realistic to the classroom experience and get students to appreciate it from that perspective. When it comes to career services specifically, we have a career curriculum, right? So it runs from first year to final year. And at every stage, we have a set of programs that we guide them through, right? And so we use that feedback, take it back to the drawing table to look at the programs we have outlined for the students to see if those programs and those sessions, career development sessions, are actually meeting the needs of industry as we've received it. It's not a set in stone curriculum that can be changed. And so what we do with that information is we take it back and we relook at it and see how to integrate the feedback into our career curriculum so that when we roll it out in the course of the year, it's actually meeting those specific needs that have come through in the evaluation or in the feedback from employers.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I'll take part of your response, Abigail, and go over to Maria Elena. So you talked about the role of faculty. So Maria Elena, from the example that you shared on Rito Coppell, what role does your faculty play? Because in traditional institutions, faculty generally want to stick to either teaching or research. This is somewhat of a new area for them, and in some institutions there might be resistance, but how has the experience been at Tech in terms of faculty engagement on this?
It has been very interesting and difficult at the same time. As you mentioned, the original interest of a faculty is research or teaching, but now there's a new path for consulting that is also very valuable for our company. So sometimes it's very difficult to find opportunities for consulting, and participating in this type of challenges allow our faculty to gain knowledge about companies and their real challenge, and also consulting process. So for them, it has been very valuable. And also they are teaching these challenges as a team. As I mentioned, there are 3 different topics in it and the challenge: project management, and innovation, because of business models. And we have 3 faculty members teaching together as a team. They don't teach alone. And that's also a very difficult change for faculty. You are not just the owner of your class. You have to share your class with 3 other colleagues and solve this real problem working together. So we have gone through a very long training process for faculty that Valerie mentioned in the framework. Training faculty has been one of the pillars of this new educational model.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting when you talk. This team teaching is also somewhat of a new concept, and now with the whole emphasis on multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary approaches, it's becoming even more in vogue. And maybe on that, I don't know, Valerie, whether you want to speak from your Seneca experience. Is that kind of an approach also being considered in terms of team teaching? Does it make sense in terms of the courses that you offer? I wonder if you could speak to that.
I don't think specifically team teaching, I mean, that would be totally context specific. So if they were teaching maybe a capstone, so we have, some of our degrees have capstone projects where the students at the end of, in their 4th year, would all have like one assignment that's due, that's based on what happens in 4 or 5 different courses. So from that perspective, the professors have to work as a team, and they might teach as a team as well, and all be there at the same time. But there certainly has to be a lot of team collaboration. I think the biggest challenge for us with a really truly outcomes-based education is the fact that the courses are focused on the outcomes and not on a textbook. So traditionally, faculty are given a course to teach. They look for a textbook and they teach. They teach from the content. And when you do outcomes-based education, you're actually teaching based on the outcomes, and you also have to determine that all of your assessments in the course are actually measuring or evaluating that the students have actually attained the outcomes, which is what Maria and Abigail have also alluded to in the scenarios that they gave examples to. So really and truly, to make sure that everything is aligned, the content actually is hard to find in a textbook, because it has to be actually tailored, or to find in one textbook, right? It has to be tailored to meeting the outcomes of the course. And that is a huge change for faculty. Right, because it's not just their content expertise that becomes the sort of leader of what they do in the classroom, but it's their assessment expertise, right? Are you really assessing that the students have the skills and the knowledge, and sometimes the attitudes, which is where the employability skills, soft skills come in, to be able to perform in the jobs that we are saying that our programs are targeting? So it really is a rethinking of, so you actually start, as you mentioned, Mac, you start with the end in mind, not what content the students are going to learn in my course, but what are they going to be able to know, think, and do based on the outcomes.
Right. And I want to stick with you for a minute, Valerie. We have a question which I think is specific to your presentation on work integrated learning. The question is, do you have these types of programs at your university? It's in 3 parts. Does it apply to all programs, and what percentage of the curriculum is WIL oriented? And just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to be brief. Thank you.
Okay, so first I can't give you a percentage because that depends on the program. Secondly, is actually part of our regulation from our ministry is any one of our degrees have to have a work integrated learning component. It's usually a semester long where the students actually have to do a co-op, and it's actually it's supposed to be a paid internship. So they work and they get and so they get paid. So it's usually a semester long, and it is actually mandated that our programs all have that work integrated learning piece. Yeah. But it could encompass many things. It could be an applied research project. It could be job shadowing. It could be actually, but it is part of every yeah. one of our degrees.
And I think it just reiterates and reinforces the point that it's guided a lot by the regulation environment. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Moving on. So there's a topical question which I think should be of interest to everyone. And so people are wondering how has the pandemic affected how you offer career-related services to the students, and have employer requirements changed as a result? Are they now looking at different skill profiles? And I guess anyone can answer. We'll give Valerie a bit of a rest and maybe ask either Maria Elena or Abigail or both to respond. But please, bearing in mind we only have a couple of minutes left, so brief answers would be welcome. Thanks.
I'm not going to talk about the career services. I left that to Abigail. That's her expertise. But bringing the new problems, the new challenges that companies have to face right now, it's how our challenge-based program has been very useful. The couple challenge for this time, for example, was exactly to answer how they have to change their business model aligned with how the retail industry is suffering as a result of the pandemic. So very quickly we can get into reality with our curriculum because they are integrated in our curriculum.
Thank you. Abigail, did you want to quickly respond?
Okay, thank you, Mark. So yes, definitely, because everything has gone online, instruction has gone online, our engagement with our students and employers has also gone online. In terms of, has it changed anything in terms of employer requirements? I wouldn't say so. I think the only major thing we did was to, when the whole pandemic started, we had to give a bit of a break to the employers to kind of understand what their situations were before they actually could come back to engage with our students. As a result of that, some of the students, not as a result of what we did, but because of the pandemic, a lot of the students lost some internship opportunities, etc. But it really, what we decided to do was to take advantage of the opportunity to still help our students to build the necessary skills they needed. So once employers opened up again with opportunities that they were ready. Definitely, there's more concentration around communication skills, for example, around students being able to brand themselves virtually or online a lot more now because all employers are online and looking for talent online. A lot of concentration moving towards technology roles, right? So computer science students are computer engineering students are being asked for more by employers because just how everything is moving in the corporate space. So these are some of the changes that we've noticed, but I think everything is pretty much on course with employers. Yes.
Thank you. And this is what we are noticing as we talk to our other clients across the world, and a renewed emphasis on digital skills, but also on resilience, which is particularly important in these challenging times. So we literally have 1 minute left, Macarena. I'm wondering if we can quickly do the final question and then wrap up. So this is pretty simple. I mean, basically what we are asking is like, if you are following any of these models, which one is closer to what you do at your institution? And there are no prizes to any of the institutions if they have the largest percentage.
Maybe there's, okay.
Here we go. So I guess more people are following the Ashesi type of model, and then Tech and Seneca are pretty much equal. So that in itself is a good insight for us. So Abigail, looks like you're doing something that has resonance in other parts of the world as well. And with that, let me thank all of the speakers: Valerie, Maria, Elena, Abigail. Thank you for sharing all your insights for us. Thanks to the IFC team, Amy, Macarena, Dina, for putting it together. Thanks to all of you for attending and also feeding us with questions. We will follow up and make available the recording of the event, and please do watch this space for details, as we will be over the coming weeks and months be organizing other seminars and webinars on this important topic of employability, and we look forward to your engagement. Thank you again, and have a good day wherever you are, and goodbye.
Thank you very much.